Hey everyone, it's Sean with Sean Woodwork. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to set yourself up for the best chance at creating successful Kumiko and Shoji. For those of you who've watched my previous videos, you'll know that I employ Shoji panels and Kumiko panels quite often in my furniture designs. I really like them. I think they're beautiful. It's a great decorative element to add. Along the way, I've learned a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes, and some of my Kumiko panels have not turned out very nicely. Some of my Shoji panels as well. And in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why and what I've discovered. For both Shoji and Kumiko panels, you need to start with a frame, whether that's a square frame or a hexagonal frame. I mostly make square frames or rectangular frames with two squares. Either way, there's a couple of ways to cut the lap joints to create those frames. The more traditional method to cutting these lap joints, the slots there, would be to do this on the bench with a small jig, a saw, and a chisel. I personally like to use my table saw to do this, and I've previously produced a video showing how I created this sled. I'll leave that also in the description below. If I'm making thousands of these strips for a project, it's really important that I can bulk cut these, and that works really well on the table saw with this sled. Essentially, you're using the blade on your table saw to create the cut. So the kerf of your blade, that's the thickness of your blade, becomes the thickness of that gap. And therefore, it's really important that the strips that you're cutting are exactly the same width of that gap. That ensures that all of the small infill pieces of the pattern are the same size later, and that the Kumiko goes together easily without breaking. And that leads me to the first challenge when creating Shoji or Kumiko, and that is the thickness of the strips that you're cutting to create your panels. The second challenge when creating strips for Kumiko is the position of the slots that you put in, the lap joints. Those have to be extremely accurate, and I've previously talked about that in the first video, part one of this series, and I'll leave a link also for that down below. If you're enjoying this video and you're learning something from it, please consider subscribing. My channel is pretty small. I don't earn money from this channel. I'm not sponsored by anyone. I do this purely to help other people discover some things that I really enjoy doing. So please consider subscribing and liking. Now getting back to the first challenge, which is the thickness of the strip itself. Now, I've tried several different methods to do this. The first method that I tried is with a thin ripping jig. You can see that mounted, that's that red jig mounted to my table saw. I just push the piece through and then I move the fence over every time. The accuracy here is okay. I wouldn't say that it's perfect. I also find that it leaves quite a bit of saw marks on the side of the Kumiko. And if you're going to do this, use a zero clearance insert in your table saw. If those thin strips get caught in between your table saw and your insert, that can be really dangerous. The other issue I found with this method is that once you set up your thin ripping jig, this time it works. You've got your strips, and then you go to use it the next time and you've used it to create another size strip for another project, and now you've got to go back through the same setup procedure to get back to the same thickness, and that wastes a lot of wood. The other method that I've tried is to use the fence to set the thickness and then use a push stick with a tooth in the back. To be honest, this is absolutely the scariest method I've ever tried. I really don't like this. I think it looks really dangerous. You've got really everything set up here for a nice accident. So I wouldn't recommend this method. The method that I've found to be the most repeatable, adjustable, and accurate and safe is with this sled that I built. I produced a video on this already, and I'll leave a description on that below. In this video, I thought I would show you what I do to set it up and also to adjust it so that the strips are very accurate and repeatable. Here's how I set up my Kumiko strip cutting jig on my table saw. Once I get both sides on the table saw, what I'll do is I'll push this up here so that there's a gap between the start of the blade and this piece, which sets the width of your Kumiko strips. I don't want it like this. The problem with this is that as I run the strip through, there's a good chance that that strip might catch, and now it's locked between the blade and this piece. That could then shoot back and cause a pretty nasty kickback. So I normally like to go about that far, roughly maybe that's an inch or so back, and then I'll lock this down. Make sure that this piece is pushed all the way up against the fence. So once I get a gap set between the blade and this piece here, I'll go ahead and I'll lock down this piece, and I'll lock down this piece, being sure to push this up against my fence. And now I've got everything set. This isn't going anywhere. Now to adjust the width of your strips, that's pretty easy. On the lower part, which sets the gap for the strips, because the part that you're cutting is going to come over, it's going to hit this side, you'll go through the blade, and what will be left is the thin strip will come here. I've intentionally put a slot here to allow for some movement here. And what I do to set my gap, it's pretty easy. I just add and subtract tape here, and that allows me to adjust and really fine-tune the thickness of my Kumiko strip. Now here I'm just doing a little bit of a test with a strip that I just cut, and I can tell that it slides a little bit too easily for the Kumiko that I'm about to make. So I just remove one piece of tape, put the sled back together, and cut a piece of Kumiko strip, and then I can test that again. And I can feel that although the piece still slides a little bit, there's quite a bit more drag. To address any concerns of kickback with this sled, I've seen that comment a couple of times. This is really the worst I've ever seen. It kind of moves back slowly and I'm able to sort of catch it, or it moves back and it falls off of the table. It never shoots back, and I have cut literally thousands of strips using this jig. It seems as long as I set it up correctly, like I showed before, it seems to work. I don't really get any kickback. In today's video, we've covered why it's important to cut accurate strips, the different methods for cutting strips, how to set up the strip cutting jig, and how to adjust the thickness. As always, thanks for watching.